gospel story comes from the gospel according to Mark, chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. Mark tells us from the beginning, as a little background, that Jesus and his disciples were nearing the end of a day of long, hard teaching near the shores of the Sea of Galilee. The crowd had become so large that we find Jesus had gotten onto a boat and was sitting out on the water as the crowd began to gather along the shorelines near the edge of the water. So at the beginning of verse 35, Mark tells us that on that day, when evening had come, Jesus turned to his disciples and he said, "Let us go over to the other side." Turning and leaving the crowd behind, they took Jesus in the boat just as he was, with other smaller boats following them. As they were going across, suddenly a storm arose. The wind was blowing, the waves were high and beating against the boat and filling it with water. The apostles, somewhat fearful for their safety, turned to Jesus, who was sleeping in the rear of the boat, and went and frantically shook him and said, "Teacher, aren't you afraid that we are about to perish?" When Jesus awoke, he stood and he rebuked the wind and the waves, saying, "Quiet, peace, be still." Then he turned to the disciples, somewhat a little irritated, and said, "Are you still lacking faith in me?" The disciples were struck with awe and began saying to one another, "Who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Such is the word of God for the people of God.